The risotto was perfect creamy, sharp with lemon, dusted lightly with pecorino. I took my time with each bite, watching the waves move like breath beyond the terrace. It was my favorite cafe in St. Augustine, tucked behind an old bookstore. Mostly tourists missed it, and that was exactly what I liked. No interruptions, no obligations, just peace. Then my phone buzzed. I saw his name before the sound even registered. Dane. We hadn't spoken in over a month. Not since the awkward brunch where Nina called my questions about their finances passive-aggressive. I almost let the call go to voicemail. Almost? But I picked up. "Hey, Mom," he said. Tone bright. Light. Rehearsed. "We're going on a trip tomorrow. Just a little break. You know, oh. And your beach house and car are already sold." My fork froze midair. Not out of fear, out of calculation. He laughed a short. Triumphant burst like someone proud of outsmarting a game they invented. I placed the fork down gently, folded my napkin across my lap, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "You forgot one thing." There was a pause, like what I took a sip of my now cold sparkling water, tasting nothing. "Reality," I said. Then I ended the call. The waiter passed by, offering dessert. I declined with a smile and stood. Dane used to love creme brulee when he was 10. He called the crack on top his favorite sound. I hadn't made it for him in years. I slipped on my gloves and nodded at the young man clearing tables. "Thank you. Everything was lovely." Outside, the coastal wind tugged at my coat. I didn't fasten it. My fingers were stiff, but my thoughts moved sharply. He thought he'd won something. He'd only forgotten who taught him how contracts work. By the time I reached my car, my mind was already on the drawer beneath my desk, the one with the fireproof lock and papers no one had touched since Marcus's funeral. The lock gave a soft click as I turned the key. The cabinet hadn't been opened in years. Inside, the folders were still stacked exactly as Marcus left them, neatly labeled in his measured handwriting. I reached for the one marked Gull's Nest Holdings and carried it to the desk. Marcus had been meticulous, sometimes to the point of obsession. After his second heart scare, he spent weeks drafting protections, layers upon layers of ownership and trusts, just in case. He'd said, "We build the walls now so you never have to pick up a sword later." The beach house was never in my name. That was intentional. A trust controlled by an LLC with no familial tie on paper. It looked like any shell company. The only thread linking it to me sat inside this folder. I powered up my laptop and opened the county registry site. It took longer than I remembered to navigate the forms. Everything had changed since the last time I checked, but the parcel number hadn't. I typed it in, pressed search, and waited. There it was. A pending request to transfer ownership. Filed 3 days ago. The scanned form appeared as a PDF, stamped with my name and signed, except it wasn't my signature. I stared at it for a long time. The loops were close. The slant almost matched. But I knew my own hand. The R in Astor was too high. The M lacked its usual dip. This wasn't a casual mistake. This was crafted, studied, practiced. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the computer soft behind me. He'd watched me sign checks. He'd handled birthday cards I wrote, and somewhere between inheritance and resentment, he'd decided my hand was his to borrow. I closed the screen and opened the folder fully. The original deed was still intact, dated, notarized, witnessed. Eldon's name was there in the legal footers, next to Marcus's. I ran my fingers along the paper edge. Dane thought he'd sold something, but the truth was, he never owned a single nail in those walls. I stood, locked the file away, and walked to the kitchen. The burner phone was still there, tucked between 2 recipe books no one had opened in years. I brought the printed form to the window where the light was stronger. Even in the afternoon haze, I could see it clearly now. The forged signature wasn't a lazy copy, it was deliberate, practiced, almost reverent in how closely it mimicked mine. The M was the same size, but the curve was tighter. He always rushed his cursive. The R was too controlled, as if trying too hard to be careful. And the tail on the final L was wrong. Too steep, too young. This wasn't a guess. It was a study. He must have watched me sign holiday cards, traced receipts, noted the angles when I wasn't paying attention. Not recently. Over years. It wasn't the signature that stung, it was the confidence he must have had while writing it. As if I'd never notice. As if I'd already stepped aside. I returned to the cabinet. Pulled a second folder. This one marked Trust Mechanics held the documents Marcus drafted after his final hospitalization. His handwriting was everywhere. Clean. Slanted. Deliberate. On the final page of the instruction set, he had written, "Do not assume trust is permanent. Keep eyes open, especially for family." That last line was underlined twice. I sat with it for a long time. I'd always thought Marcus was being paranoid. I'd rolled my eyes, told him Dane was impulsive, not cruel, that Nina was high-strung, not conniving, that Calla would keep them honest. But Marcus didn't believe in relying on character when law could do the work. I traced the underline with my finger, then folded the document back into place. He didn't just forge my name. He counted on my silence, on my habit of not making waves, on the mother who said yes more than she should have, and who chose peace over pride. I stood slowly, heart steady now. He thought I wouldn't fight back. I reached for my coat and the silver flash drive in the desk drawer. It was time to test what else they thought I'd never do. The office was newer than I expected. Clean lines, frosted glass, a water wall burbling nonsense in the corner. I wore beige slacks, a muted silk scarf, and the oversized sunglasses I only brought out for airport pickups. My name today was Lenora Vale, a harmless widow from Michigan, casually interested in something coastal and private. The receptionist didn't blink. I was escorted into a minimalist conference room with too much chrome. A young agent arrived moments later. Perfect hair, expensive watch. Cologne that arrived before he did. He introduced himself as Chase. He smiled, leaned forward. "So, we've got something really special that's just about to clear. Waterfront. Gulf facing. It's technically pre-sold, but I think we might have a window if we move quickly." I tilted my head, keeping my voice soft. "Pre-sold?" He nodded. "The sellers are family. Finalizing title." "It's more of a formality at this point." "Who's on the title?" I asked, letting a touch of innocence bleed into the question. He hesitated. "It's through a layered entity. Older LLC? Legacy setup?" I nodded slowly. "Sounds secure." Then I reached into my purse and placed a slim silver USB drive on the table. He looked down at it, confused. "I always run diligence," I said lightly, pulling a business card with a fake company logo and sliding it over. "Have your legal team look it over." His smile faltered, not fully, but enough for me to see the crack. I stood before he could respond. "I'll let you know," I said, smoothing my scarf. As I walked past reception, I could feel the tension behind the frosted glass ripple to life, but no one followed me out. Back in the car, I sat for a full minute before starting the engine, not because I was shaken, but because I wanted to feel that shift when doubt slipped across the face of someone too sure of themselves. I turned the key. I didn't need them to call back. I only needed the panic to start. By the time I returned home, I already knew I'd checked the garage. The car was gone. The next morning, I walked downstairs with my grocery list in hand and stopped cold at the garage door. I pressed the remote. Nothing. Just the echo of an empty space. My car was gone. I checked the street. Then the side lot. Nothing. For a moment. I thought maybe I'd forgotten left it at the cafe or parked out front after dinner. But I hadn't left the house since the brokerage visit. The only sound I remembered from the night before was the dishwasher cycling off. I crossed the hall and knocked on Mrs. Elson's door. She answered in slippers, a robe wrapped tight, always alert. "Did you notice if my car was here this morning?" I asked. She blinked, then nodded. "Your daughter-in-law was driving it. Wasn't she left just before 9? I waved, but I don't think she saw me. "Thought you were with her." I smiled politely, thanked her, and returned inside. Nina had always been able to lie with ease. But taking the car wasn't a mistake, it was a test. The lease wasn't under my name. It was held by one of the asset trusts Marcus had created, filed under a business line designed for insulation. I still had the contact. I called the company and calmly reported unauthorized use, possible transport across state lines. I added, they didn't ask many questions. Within the hour, I received an update the GPS had pinged in southern Georgia. The vehicle was recovered and impounded by sunset. No confrontation, no shouting, just paperwork. They didn't think I'd notice, or maybe they thought I'd let it go. Either way, they underestimated the woman who signed the original lease. I hung up and walked to the study. The file labeled Trust Mechanics was already waiting on the desk. The bank smelled like varnish and old carpet. Mr. Fallon met me in his office, the same glass-walled corner he'd used since before Marcus passed. He stood when I entered, as if nothing between us had shifted over the years. "I need to amend the beneficiary file," I said, placing the folder gently on his desk. "It's time." He opened it, flipped through the pages slowly. "Is this about the—" "I'd prefer we not name it," I said, keeping my tone even. "Let's just call it the contingency plan." He nodded and reached for the printed forms. I signed on every line without pausing. Midway through, he stopped and looked at me. "You're removing Dane, yes." He hesitated. "You don't have to explain." "But I'm not going to," I said. We continued in silence. I filled out the updated beneficiary section with deliberate care. Calla Estelle Astor, born June 10th. My handwriting didn't shake. "Would you like her notified?" he asked. "Not yet. She's still too close to them." He nodded again and slid the documents into the formal envelope stamped with the bank's seal. "I'll file it by noon." I stood, adjusted my scarf. "Please label this file 2025 contingency. Keep it sealed." He held my gaze for a moment, then gave the smallest smile. "Of course." Back home, I placed the updated file into the study drawer, just behind the copy of Marcus's original structuring notes. For the first time in weeks, my hands didn't tremble. I didn't feel guilt, not grief, only precision. Dane had removed himself. I'd simply recorded it. I made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen counter. Outside, the wind moved through the palms. I thought about calling Calla. I didn't have to. That evening, she rang the doorbell. Calla stood on the porch, holding a backpack and a tired look I hadn't seen on her before. She didn't explain why she came, and I didn't ask. I stepped aside and let her in. She slipped off her shoes and followed me to the kitchen without a word. She sat at the counter while I pulled out the flour, the eggs, and the old iron skillet Marcus never let me replace. The kitchen filled with the scent of browning batter and quiet tension. We didn't need small talk. That was never our way. "Dad's been acting weird," she said finally, arms folded tight on the counter, and Mom keeps whispering in the other room. Last night, I heard him say, "She's out of the way now." I flipped the pancake, let it fall cleanly onto the plate. I dusted it with sugar and slid it across to her. Then I reached for the folder I'd left on the far end of the table. "I want to show you something," I said. "Only if you're ready." She pulled the folder toward her and opened it slowly, like it might burn. Her eyes scanned the first page, her name printed under Trust Beneficiary, next to my signature. Below it, A copy of the forged deed transfer. Next, the impound report from Georgia. Then emails between Nina and 2 brokers, planning the refinance. And finally, a final page with her name typed, initialed, and stamped. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just sat with it. Her brow drawn like Marcus's when he used to read depositions. This says, "I own the beach house," she whispered. "Not yet." I said, "But one day, after you're 25, legally, fully, and Dad, he tried to sell what was never his. He sold paper. I gave you something real." She looked down at her plate, then back at the file. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. I poured her tea. She took it with honey, like I do. We sat together, quiet, while the sun moved slowly across the tile. She stayed the night. I slept better than I had in weeks, until the knock came the next morning. The knock came sharp and fast. No pause between raps. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I opened the door to find them both on the porch. Dane rigid, face flushed, Nina hiding behind oversized sunglasses, arms crossed tight. "What the hell did you do?" Dane snapped, stepping forward like he might come inside without permission. I let him. Nina followed, her silence more brittle than usual. The moment the door closed, Dane turned on me. "You're ruining everything. You don't even understand what you've done." I picked up the phone resting on the hall table and tapped the red button. The screen lit. "Recording. I understand perfectly." I said, "You forged my name, attempted to transfer protected assets, used the car without authorization, and now you're here, in my home, raising your voice." Nina stepped forward, voice sharp. "Don't dramatize this. We can fix it, but you need to stop playing games." I reached for the envelope I'd placed by the teapot that morning. 2 copies, one for each of them. I handed them over without ceremony. Dane looked down at the paper like it might bite. "What is this filed yesterday?" I said, "You should read it carefully." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dane's jaw clenched. Nina still hadn't removed her sunglasses. "Get out," I said, soft and steady. They did. No shouting, no slamming, just the sound of shoes against tile. Then the weight of the door closing behind them. I didn't watch from the window. I walked back to the burner phone on the bookshelf and dialed Eldon. "They'll try something else," I said. He didn't ask how I knew, just answered. "Then we stay ahead." I stood at the window and finally watched them leave. Nina was talking with her hands. Dane said nothing. They looked smaller than they had an hour ago, by the end of the week. The listing disappeared. Detective Rowan Fisk arrived just after 10. No sirens. No badge flash. Just a soft knock and a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. He introduced himself with a nod and a quiet, "May I come in?" I led him to the kitchen and poured tea without asking if he wanted any. He accepted it, one hand already opening the folder on the counter. "We received some documents from the Manatee County Title Office," he said, laying out photocopies. A clerk flagged inconsistencies in a deed transfer request. That led us to 2 others, all tied to the same property, all under your name. I nodded once. It wasn't my hand. He flipped to the signature pages. "We know. The curve's off. Stroke pressure doesn't match. We're running comparisons now, but you made it easy. The originals were archived cleanly." He paused, then looked up at me. "You're not the first to outmaneuver a con, Mrs. Astor, but you might be the quietest." I didn't smile. I wasn't looking for a scene, just correction. He closed the folder, folded his hands. "The district attorney isn't pushing charges yet. We're still mapping out the financial trail, but it's coming together." I reached for the envelope with Kalla's name. "If charges are filed, I want this sealed. Her name's in the trust now, but she had no part in any of it. She's a minor. She's innocent." He accepted the envelope. eyes steady. Understood. We sat for a moment in silence. Then he stood, tucked the folder back under his arm. We'll be in touch. And for what it's worth, I've rarely seen a case this organized from the outside in. I saw him to the door, closed it gently behind him. For the first time, I felt the house breathe. Calla was upstairs, typing. I could hear the soft rhythm of her keyboard. She hadn't asked for updates, and I hadn't offered them. Later that night, she showed me what she was writing, an essay on legacy and ethics. The sky was just beginning to warm when I stepped onto the balcony, tea in hand. The boards were cool beneath my feet, still damp with night air, across the water. The horizon bloomed with the faintest blush of morning. Inside, I could hear the quiet clack of Calla's keyboard. She'd risen early to work on her college essay, something about legacy, ethics, and the laws we inherit and the ones we choose to write ourselves. She hadn't let me read it yet, but she would. She always did. I sat at the corner table and wrapped both hands around my mug. No messages, no noise, just peace. Dane had filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. The investigation dried up every account they thought they could hide. Nina left him a few days later and, in predictable fashion, filed suit for emotional and financial damages. I didn't follow the details. I didn't need to. Calla hadn't spoken to him since the morning he yelled in this kitchen. Her silence wasn't vengeful. It was final. I saw it in the way she now moved through this house light, unhurried, without waiting for shadows. The trust held the deed now, as it always had. My name was no longer the end point. Hers sat neatly beneath it, tucked into the document where Marcus once imagined a future we'd never lived long enough to see. She didn't ask for it, and I didn't gift it to feel noble. It was simply right. The tea cooled in my cup, untouched. Below, the tide kissed the shoreline and pulled back gently. Again and again. Inside, I heard her stop typing. Then the soft scrape of her chair, the pad of bare feet across the floor. She appeared in the doorway with her laptop in one hand and the kind of look that didn't ask for permission. "Can I read you something?" she asked. I nodded, pushed a second chair toward her, and poured the last of the tea.